got an interview with Barney Frank, who he was always a blunt guy as a congressman
Oh,
for,
yeah.
I believe, 32 years, I think it was.
More than 3 decades.
Yeah, representing Massachusetts, and he has not changed as he faces the end of his life. And remind us more about what made him a national figure and tell us about this conversation.
Well, let me say that he has a new book coming out. That's
Ah.
why he's sort of making the rounds right now.
Okay.
The book is called The Hard Path to Unity, Why We Must Reform the Left to Rescue Democracy. And what he's engaged in, essentially, is a book tour / an end-of-life cri de coeur to Democrats to get their act together as he sees it. His basic theory in this book is that certain elements of the Democratic Party, particularly on the party's left flank, are damaging Democrats as a whole by insisting that everyone in the party take certain stances on issues that the general public might not be ready to embrace. So he's trying to get this message out. And I asked him if he's feeling optimistic about the future, about the durability of American democracy. Here's what he had to say.
I wish I wasn't dying. On the other hand, I am very happy to have the opportunity to make this point because I really think, I think we're at a cusp. I am optimistic. You asked me about liberal democracy being reactionary popular, but I'm not convinced. I think I've gotten a rare opportunity to frankly put my money where my mouth is on that issue.
You asked me what made Frank such a big figure nationally. We can't even do justice to it in
Right.
the time that we have, but he was the first member of Congress to come out voluntarily, first member of Congress to wed a member of the same sex. And he believes that gay rights should be sort of the model for how Democrats deal with controversial issues, because he told me, and he's told other media outlets, they left the most controversial proposition, marriage, for last. They started off focusing on non-discrimination in employment, focusing on the ability of gays and lesbians and transgender people to serve in the military, and they deferred marriage as a proposition until the end. It wasn't that they weren't talking about it, but they were willing to see people like former President Obama, who you'll remember, and Frank pointed out, used to oppose gay marriage until I
Yes.
believe 2004. They still saw him as an ally because he was with them on other issues. And he thinks that sort of flexibility of thinking is desperately needed for Democrats right now.
Well, we have a Democrat who's going to be running for re-election right here, who's also happens to be out. What does Governor Maura Healey think about the points Barney Frank is making?
Governor Healey, I would say, voiced admiration for Barney Frank in a recent interview that she did that was published in Axios. She voiced admiration for Frank. I guess agreed with him to a certain extent by saying that Democrats need to be focused on issues that matter to people, affordability in particular. She didn't reject Frank's thesis, but I would say she didn't enthusiastically embrace it. She's been consistent throughout her tenure as governor with very few exceptions. She wants people to think that she's focused on affordability, affordability, affordability. And that was sort of the theme that she struck when she was asked about what Frank had to say.
So staying with the theme of what kind of reform is needed in the Democratic Party, we've been hearing your reporting about a new poll in the Massachusetts Democratic Senate primary.
That's right.
Seth Bolton, challenger versus incumbent Ed Markey. And as I've said, maybe a little ad nauseum, forgive me, dear listener, generational change is his cri de coeur. So when you look at this poll, how does that fit into where is the Democratic Party headed? Where do people think it needs to head?
Well, it's worth noting that Ed Markey is a co-sponsor of the Green New Deal. And when I talked to Barney Frank, he specifically cited the Green New Deal as a damaging litmus test for Democrats, arguing, again, that the general public is not ready to go as far as the New Deal does. We've got this interesting contrast between Markey and Moulton, in which Moulton is pushing general change, but Markey is probably to the left of Moulton on most issues. Remember, Moulton caused a big stir by coming out and saying that he was uncomfortable with trans women participating in women's sports. Again, to mention Barney Frank, when I talked to him, drew an analogy between trans women participating in women's sports and gay marriage, arguing that the left should be doing more on basic core rights for, as he put it, for transgender people, and deferring participation in sports until the general public is more at ease with the trans population. He said the more that the public gets to know the objects of discrimination, the more familiar they become and the less likely the public is to discriminate against them. So again, in Markey versus Moulton, we've got this, just to reiterate, contrast between an older, more progressive Dem and a younger Dem who's striking a more moderate tone.
And now here's a different spin on it. I want to weave in this big upset in the Maine Senate Democratic primary race. This is from last Friday, happened after you and I talked. And centrist Governor Janet Mills, the party-backed candidate to try and take back the Senate seat from Republican Susan Collins this November, she dropped out, leaving neophyte populist oyster farmer Graham Plattner to go up against Collins. And this really says something, I think. When Mills had Senate leader Chuck Schumer and the party apparatus and money backing her the day after she declared, Graham Plattner, we've talked about, and people may be aware, he's had some dings on him, things he said, a tattoo that might have looked like a Nazi
that
thing.
has Nazi
and
imagery
here
that
he
said
is. He is the
got
last
without knowing
man
what it meant.
standing.
That's right.
And these are, again, two very different visions of what it takes to be a winning Democrat and where the party should be.
They're two very different visions. His focus, if you read through his platform, I was looking at where he is on various issues right before we talked. He sounds a lot like Elizabeth Warren. It's all about taking on the billionaire class that he says owns Washington, can buy politicians. Now, it's interesting. Graham Plattner, among the other arguments he makes, is that every politician in Washington who does not support a constitutional amendment repealing Citizens United should be booted. So right there, Graham Plattner is proposing his own litmus test. And my hunch is that if Barney Frank were to give Graham Plattner counsel, and Barney Frank, by the way, is in hospice in Algonquin, Maine, my guess is he would say to him, let's not say that every Democrat should be booted if they don't back overturning Citizens United. Let's look for allies who are generally going to be with us when it comes to economic populism, but let's not create a new litmus test that could be damaging to party unity.
Yeah, I mean, he's a populist. He says he's a working man populist. His biggest endorsement from the beginning, Bernie Sanders. So,
Yep.
Yes.